Welcome to Hard Beautiful Journey, where we embrace vulnerability as our superpower and let courage light our path. I'm Tiff Carson, here to share heartfelt stories of healing, grief, and resilience. Each week, I'll talk with guests from experts to everyday heroes about their journeys through adversity. Together, we'll uncover the beauty that emerges from life's challenges and how each experience can spark profound growth. Join us on this courageous journey of connection and transformation. Hey there, welcome back to Hard Beautiful Journey. Today on the podcast, I have Aaron French with me. Aaron's journey is anything but ordinary, yet he might say it's not unique at all. His path has taken him from sitting with Ram Dass to living deep in the Congo Basin with the Baka hunter-gatherers, from crafting rawhide drums in the Colorado Rockies to receiving powerful channeled messages from ancestors and spirit guides. And through it all, he has come to embody a truth that is both ancient and profoundly relevant. We are not separate, but one. On Hard Beautiful Journey, we talk about healing, transformation, and finding meaning in the messiness of being human. And Aaron's work aligns beautifully with the Healing Heart Journey framework, particularly in how he helps others use their voice, awaken to their deeper spiritual essence, and navigate life's transitions with a more expansive understanding of self. Welcome to the show, Aaron. How are you?
I'm great. It's so great to be here. Thank you.
I am so excited to talk to you. I have been looking at your Instagram account and following everything that you're doing, and there's so much that I need to ask you. But before we dive into your journey, I want to start with a question. I always try and find an interesting question. The one that helps our listeners truly feel who you are and not just what you do. So if I were to sit across from your soul, not your physical body, and ask it to introduce itself without any labels or roles or titles, what would your soul say?
Such a beautiful question. Yeah. My soul would say, I'm the light of the universe. Happy to meet your light of the universe.
I love that. Oh my goodness.
Right? Our souls are just these emanations of the everything that are here to reflect and to see back towards ourselves, towards everything, right? When we're not on earth and when we're not in other emanations, when we're in between and we're part of the all, our souls still exist, but we can't see ourselves fully because we're so completely part of everything. So the way I'm shown this, which is not so different from other folks, is that we're here on earth specifically to experience the separation, and even to the topic of this podcast, even all of our shadow, all of our traumas, all of our wounding is actually the reason we're here, because that shows us the depth of experience that's possible, and that allows us to go towards the light and to experience the rapture of reconnection with all things. Yeah.
All right, let's go back to before all of this. Before all of this that you've been experiencing over the last many years. Take me back to a time when this wasn't your life, your experience.
Yeah. My childhood was in some ways really open and free and joyous. My parents were kind of hippie, and I lived a really free life where I didn't go to like normal school until 4th grade. So that early period, I had a lot of, speaking of really vulnerable, hard, beautiful journey topics, like, my dad would beat me when I was really little, just out of his anger and rage at himself, I think. And he would say to me things like, you're so lucky that I'm not beating you as bad as my dad beat me. So you should be thankful. Things like this. So that was happening. but I largely blocked those things out and didn't even remember them until deep into my adulthood.
Oh,
I just
really?
completely suppressed all that. And
Mhm.
I went to normal school in fourth grade, and I was sort of, I've been raised so hippie and so outside of society that I didn't know anything. And it was such a huge shock for me that I completely withdrew. And I got a huge stutter where I could barely speak.
Mhm.
I walked through the world for many years as assuming that everyone thought I was a weirdo and didn't like me and that I was an outcast and a strange person, and just assumed I was better off alone. And the only person I could trust was myself. So I had many years. This continued, certainly through junior high, high school, and it tapered off through college. And but those voices in our heads continue on, right? All the negative talk in our minds continues on even far beyond that. So uh, much of my life, I deeply know, and many other difficult experiences, I deeply know the feeling of being alone, feeling small, feeling separated, feeling worthless in many, many, many dimensions of the human experience.
Mhm.
Um,
So what was that moment where you realized that, there's more to life than those experiences up to that point?
yeah. I mean, spirit kept my spirit and the spirit of the universe together kept trying to connect through me.
Mhm.
There was one moment in junior high or the after junior high before high school when I did have this epiphany in the middle of the night. I was awake. It wasn't a dream, but I had a vision of this voice that came to me and said, "Aaron, you can be anyone you want. You can change yourself. You can be who you want to be." At the time, junior high, high school, what that meant was, oh, I want to be popular. I want girls to like me.
Mhm.
Like it meant
Yep.
that. It didn't mean at the time, that didn't mean, oh, I can be free of all of this. I didn't. And I did actually believe that voice. And I did actually make some changes. And actually, internally, I was still sort of the same miserable, insecure person. But outwardly, I was able to shift some things and become more socially integrated than I was before that, let me say.
Yeah.
But looking back, that was one of those times when my soul perhaps was opening up to try and feel the wisdom of the universe come through.
Mhm.
And it was really, I became a biologist in college. I became an ecologist and I spent tons of time outside in nature. And, what I thought I was doing, and I was physically doing this, was watching the birds and monkeys around the world and studying their behavior. But what that meant was that I spent, literally thousands and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of hours sitting still without moving, looking through binoculars or a scope, looking at a tree or the birds flying or the monkeys or whatever, and
Mm.
meditating on nature. Just spending hours and hours, right? Like
Mhm.
really deep attention on nature. And
Where you were forced to. It was your
I
job.
was forced to through the choice, I chose to be an ecologist. And if you move, you spend hours waiting and not moving so that the birds and animals will come into the tree, and so you can watch them and watch their behaviors. And maybe you're trying to see a tag on their leg to see what they're doing, or they're mating, or how they're eating,
Mhm.
depending on the project. And if you move, they scare away, and you've wasted an hours of your day.
Yeah.
So you train yourself, even if there's like a fly crawling on your face or a snake going by that's not a threat to you or whatever, you just stay perfectly still.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years later when I started to meditate, I realized, oh my goodness, I was training my mind, my body to be still and listen and settle.
That
And
is
through
the
that,
ultimate training ground.
when I started to meditate, I was like, oh, I know what it feels like to sit still. I know what it feels like to have a second attention, which is one of the
Yeah.
phrases in some meditations, right? On
Yeah.
beyond my thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, now it still was, difficult, and I resisted and fought and kicked for years about meditation. It's not an easy
No.
to this day. I say there's some schools of meditation that say like quiet your mind. And I'm like, well, that's never been my experience. My experience is
Never.
my mind is going.
Mhm.
And I have learned to sort of maybe, you set my mind aside a little bit energetically so that I can be here and more centered and open, and my thoughts are sort of not central to my awareness.
Yeah.
The thoughts still go. But it was after that when just, teachers started to appear, experiences started to unfold for me where I couldn't ignore the pull that, oh, my life is more than this rational scientific Western viewpoint. I need to really go deeper and explore what's beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
And
even that was twisty and turny, but yeah, please.
was that when you sat with Ram Dass? Was he one of your first
Yeah, Ram
teachers?
Dass was an early part of that journey. That was right after I had first gone to the rainforest and was in Costa Rica, and that was still in college, and I was studying. I did a tropical abroad study program in Costa Rica, and in my travels down for that program, I ended up in Belize in this small little hut with my friends in the back alleys of Belize City. And we were there to get high. We wanted to, we reached out to some little kid on the street and said, hey, we want to score some weed. And he took us out to this little tiny hut in the middle of Belize City, not where you'd expect to find a spiritual book. And we got really, really high. And it was during that experience where actually I left my body and was traveling deep in the cosmos. I'm not sure what was in the joint. And I realized oh, I'm not safe here. I don't know what my friends are doing. I'm drifting out of my body. I can see my body and I'm like, what's happening? And I had a really expansive out of body experience. I was like, oh, I'm not safe to continue exploring. I don't know what's happening. And I crashed back into my body and I sort of woke up from my my weed induced delirium and experience. And I looked down and there was Be Here Now on the floor next to me.
Oh, wow.
There was no other books in this it was literally a dirt floor hut.
Yeah. And that
There was no other books. And right next to me was Be Here Now. I had never seen the book before. I opened it up in that state of expansiveness and flipped through it. And if you know the book, there's pictures and there's big words and drawings, and it's a wild, beautiful book. If you don't know it, I recommend it. And it just blew my mind open.
So was that the moment that flipped everything that you thought you knew?
No, I still was my ego,
you were still in your ego.
I'll just speak for myself. My ego is so strong. And I was I had a lot of pressure from my dad to be a scientist. So I was like, I'm going to be a famous scientist and I'm going to succeed on that level.
Yeah.
But still.
Was he a scientist? Is that why? Or
he was a doctor. It was my great grandfather was a very prominent, eminent ecologist. In the U.S., there's the eminent ecologist from the Ecology Society, and he's the first one ever. He's sort of this tower. And so in my family, he was this character, my great grandfather, to live up to. And there's a lot of pressure. So my dad was a scientist and a doctor, but he wanted me to be a more strict scientist, and I embraced that. There was a lot of pressure to do a PhD, which I actually didn't do. I turned it down. So it for me, it was not one thing that really opened the door. It was I had to be cracked. My nut of rationalism had to be cracked many times, slowly, and the door kept opening where finally I just couldn't. I couldn't keep pretending that I was an entirely rational being, but it took many, many knocks on the coconut for me. many over years. I kept on saying, yeah, this is great, but I'm still this, and then I would open deeper, and then more things would happen, and I was like, I took many of those. I was a tough nut to crack.
Did you have a dark night?
Yeah. Many. I would say, skipping years ahead, I'll quickly tell the story, and I'm happy to digress.
Yeah.
But after this, years later, I ended up with a guru who was teaching Kashmiri Shaivism, and I was with him for years, deep in the inner circle of this group. There was accusations of rape and stealing money and all kinds of allegations around that. Sort of the group split up. I was deeply sort of betrayed. That was one really deep, dark night where, at that point I had joined this group and said, okay, I'm going to really go deeply on this path of spirituality. And then I was like, oh, wow, all of this is baloney. I don't believe any of it now. I'm going to go back and pretend I'm entirely rational. Well, of course, that didn't take. I had a Taoist teacher after that for many years, sort of overlapping, but after that for many years as well. And then 2 divorces. during that time, my physical Western sort of job title shifted dramatically. I became after I was a scientist, I became a chef for many years, quite successful at that. I got an MBA and moved into the supply chain in the food industry. Worked for some of the biggest corporations in America. Traveled on private jets and did multi-million-dollar deals in boardrooms. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was exploring spirituality and doing all this stuff. I wasn't happy doing any of that. I was pretty miserable. Even the
Can I
highlights of being a
interrupt
very
you for a
successful
second?
executive. Please do. Yeah.
While you were doing that and like traveling around the world and this big executive person also dabbling in spirituality, was there a sense of like not wanting people to know that you were doing
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I would, and sometimes my friends would out me, like at a party, and one of my friends was like, "Oh, Aaron's teaching a class on the spiritual path. Do you
Yeah.
guys know about it?" And I would be like, "Oh no, what did you do?"
Yeah.
I would very much, yeah. This whole time, I was, when I was a scientist, and then later as a chef, and then later especially as a business executive, where very much I had my suit, not my physical suit, which I wore, but also just my suit of like, this is who I am in this environment. And then
Mm-hmm.
I will go, and I had different personas I would put on very strongly. So I wasn't being honest and true to myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was literally killing me. I became, not massively, but for me, overweight and unhealthy. I was eating poor food and all of that, emotionally, I was just doing things to soothe myself in various ways. My relationship suffered. I wasn't a good partner. I'm a good person. I tried to be, but I know I wasn't a good partner in all kinds of ways. And certainly I wasn't attracting the right partners either in terms of
Mm-hmm.
because of my energy.
Yeah.
And so it took, so I was successful in many, many ways in that world. And also I wasn't happy. And also I wasn't happy. And then I would sort of get uninterested and bored.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would leave or I would get let go from various jobs. And, so it was my second divorce and sort of continuing unhappiness with my job life. And finally, all of this, it was finally in like the winter of 2018 when I had the deepest moment. I was alone and I was numbing out with Netflix until, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, just until I was so exhausted I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
function anymore and didn't have to think about anything and crash asleep, get up early, literally pound like 5 cups of coffee, throughout the morning, go to work looking exhausted and try to function at a high level, but I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, one night of doing that for months, um, again, I had this vision, this awareness came to me. And I just had this awareness, and it was, Aaron, if you continue to live like this, you're already dead.
Mm-hmm.
Not physically. I wasn't suicidal. It wasn't that. It was just energetically. I was shown. And I think by myself, by my higher self, but we could talk about it in various ways. I was shown the trajectory of my life into the future. And I saw the empty isolation
Mm-hmm.
and the loneliness and the smallness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Of sort of choosing to be cut off and separated. At that point, I was again in this period of like, nothing matters. I'm a small, separate, alone individual, not connected to the universe. I'd gone through many waves of connection and then contraction. And I just completely surrendered in a way that, and as I said, I was a hard nut to crack. I mean, I had many, many other, this is a shortened story of difficulties, hardships, difficult situations. And finally, I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I
Okay.
surrender.
I had the same
I'm
one,
I'm
Aaron.
not gonna live like this ever again. And
Mm-hmm.
I researched. I'd heard about these men's workshops. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do one. And at the time, I was like, I'm gonna look for ones that aren't overtly spiritual. So I found a couple that on their website, it wasn't they weren't like 100% spiritual on their website. And I was like, okay, I can do these.
Yeah.
And I did 2 in a row. They were
And were they
fantastic. And
overtly spiritual, or
they
were
weren't,
they?
but it was in there. But
Yeah.
at the time too, that was, by the time they rolled around, it was a few months later. And even after the first workshop of just like connecting with men in this case and opening my heart and breaking through,
Mm-hmm.
the spiritual teachings that I had learned over, decades before became rushing back, and my connection to the universe, my heart just for months was just like opening and opening and opening, like the light kept pouring in or out or through and connecting. I was crying, not out of pain, but out of just like the rapturous joy of the universe uncontrollably. Even as a man, I mean, this is being really honest and vulnerable. Like, I was still at this point an executive in a food company, and I would leave meetings and go out to the parking lot of my car, take a walk, and just start crying, sneak into the bathroom on the way back in and try and like splash my face and pretend like everything was fine. And it wasn't that I was sad, it was that I was opening so deeply to the connection with the universe that my heart and my whole energy body, it was like crying from relief and joy and happiness and still melancholy sorrow. And there's still more stuff to unearth.
Mm-hmm.
And it just has been a cannonball of catapulting expansion and connection and joy and love ever since.
I
Um,
think that it's the I had the same year actually as when it started
mm,
for me, 2018, and I had the same experience. Mine was hiding behind the clothes in my closet, hiding from my kids. Um, and it was I saw a fork in the road, and you're either going to go down this one and you're going to keep going and be absolutely miserable for the rest of your life, or check out, or you're going to go this other way now. And these are your options. And I had guttural crying, like guttural, but it was so strange because it was painful crying, but it also felt healing, and it felt like it was leading to something else. Is that how it felt for you?
Sometimes when you say that, I can feel that.
Mhm.
Yeah, like there's part of the crying, the guttural and the energetics of it where you need to shake up the body. I mean, the whole
Mhm.
somatic aspect of like that physical
Mhm.
shaking loose the trauma, shaking loose that heavy energy, shaking loose the past in all its forms,
Mhm.
and ejecting that or releasing it or whatever it is. It could be sometimes ejecting maybe and sometimes softly integrating,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
tensions and knots of all these past traumas in our bodies and everything that's holding us back from being free.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Like it I was brought back to that time as you were talking. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." It seems like so long ago, but instantly I was brought back there. Instantly. In a good way though, where it's like I can see so much growth. And I remember distinctly before all of this and not even being aware of this other life, and like
Bingo.
the beauty that's here now. Not
The
that I didn't
beauty.
have the beauty with my family and my husband
Sure.
and my kids. It was a different kind of beauty.
And for me, I was in, so, the dark night of the soul, we could talk about it in various ways. Like, I opened up and then there was still periods, like it was maybe a year later where I remember telling my friend, so, um, the beginning of all through 2019, then, the winter of 2018, I was really sort of decided to make some changes. And it was really the spring of 2019. I mean, it was happening immediately from 2018, but spring of 2019 was when I really opened up deeply to spirit and the world and the
Mhm.
universe and all dimensions. And then that year was sort of this roller coaster of expansion and, not all easy peasy. It was certainly, 2020 rolled around, and even before the pandemic hit, my mom was dying of cancer and passed away right before the pandemic closed things down in 2020. And and that sort of set me off, and I realized I wasn't depressed, but I became a little bit detached and cold. And sort of, I
Mm-hmm.
entered this little bit of a darkness, but also a light. It was a lightness, but it was a darkness. And it was sort of a separation where I wasn't fully connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And that took around perhaps 6 months-ish or something like that. And then when I broke out of that was when I really opened up into the rapture of like, wow, the sunlight on my face and the flowers and everything. When I broke out of that depth, then I entered a whole new frequency of energy where I was feeling the intensity of the beauty of every single moment of life so much deeper. And that
Mm-hmm.
has never left me since.
That has never
Uh,
left. It's still
that has
there.
It's still there. And, one way to talk about this is an experience, some traditions call it non-duality, where we're so deeply meshed into the fabric of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
You become accustomed to it and you integrate it and then you deepen. So I feel it. I don't always take the moment that I did, the very first moment where I felt the sunlight in that rapture. I don't get lost in it in every moment because it's here around me so deeply. But at
Mm-hmm.
any moment, I can connect, like right now, and just connect deeper into the soup of existence where I can feel the light and the air and everything becomes crystalline and direct and time sort of expands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything
I
slows
I
down.
get that when I'm out in nature all the time, especially when I was writing my book. I've talked about this many times on my podcast, but I couldn't write inside walls. I just couldn't do it. It was like crickets. There was 0 words that came through my fingers into my laptop. But as soon as I took my laptop and my chair and I put myself by water or by trees or by the ocean, it was literally like the words just came right out of me, and I could feel it just felt different. That's all I can describe. It just
Beautiful.
felt so different, and very healing to have that nature around me giving me those words. It was, that's when I really felt connected to the universe in a different way than before.
And still now, people ask me in spiritual mentoring, how do I'm feeling a pull towards openness, towards my soul's purpose, towards connecting. People express it in all kinds of ways. And I give them, books and tools and techniques and we can work together. And I also say the very first thing is just go outside, walk on your favorite trail, talk to the trees.
Mhm.
Like, I
It's
ask people
true.
all the time,
Talk
do
to the
you talk to the
trees.
trees? For sure. And the
Mhm.
rocks and the water and
Yep.
the sky.
Mhm.
But the trees right now in particular are really accessible and they're so happy to talk to us. They're so happy to connect to us and be this conduit of wisdom, of knowledge, of ancient truth from
Mhm.
across all time.
So,
And
like,
they're
some
so
people think
accessible.
we're crazy for saying talk to the
But
trees.
increasingly, no. I mean, increasingly. So the way, many people are saying this, and I absolutely experienced it the last few years. It's been the gradient, but the last couple of years in particular, there's this really powerful experience of mass awakening where
Mhm.
all of us so it's not everyone, and that's
True.
100% okay.
Yeah.
There are people who are choosing in whatever way, maybe this lifetime, however we want to say this, are just not choosing to awaken, and that's 100% fine.
Mhm.
And for those of us that feel the pull, it becomes inescapable, where we're being swept up in a current of energy or intention or however it is for us, and so more and more people are like, "Oh yeah, I am talking to the trees." And I would have thought that was crazy 5 years ago, or I used to think it was crazy, but it's just my experience now, and it's just matter of fact. It's just truth. It's
Mhm.
just simple truth now. The universe, the energy it's not the way it was when I was a kid, or certainly my parents or grandparents. There was
Mhm.
a density and a closeness to the energy then that does not exist now. There's a vibrant, alive awareness that's all around us that, again, anyone who's a little bit awake cannot help but experience in all kinds of ways.
So how do you reconcile that with what's going on in the world right now, in
Beautiful.
particular in the States?
Yeah. Well, this is what's shown to me. So now, just for more background too, like I get lots of information just from the universe itself, but also from, angels, spirit guides, various beings, trees
Mhm.
speak to me about just the nature of deep time and what is. And what they show me and what my experience is that in this three-dimensional realm right now, as more and more of us awaken and as we create more and more light, there has to be an equal and opposite amount of darkness.
Yep.
And there will be, and there is going to be a sort of a phase shift where we enter a new realm or timeline or dimension. There are lots of different language types around this, where there's more light overall.
Yeah.
But right now we're in this, from some traditions, we're at the end of the Kali Yuga and the beginning of a new era, in the age of Aquarius, or at that transition point. So we're in this inflection point, the end of the Mayan calendar, this transition point from that calendar. Many traditions have this inflection point right now. And so we're in this transition phase where we're still in the old paradigm and we're shifting out of it, but we're still in it. And so in this three-dimensional world right now today, the universe is inherently neutral. This is truth. And there's a gradient of all things. And there's light and dark and day and night and up and down. And inherently, from the absolute neutral perspective, there's no good and bad. From the human perspective, there's absolutely good and bad. And, when I'm hurt, that's bad for me. I don't like it, and for all compassion to all the people that are feeling the atrocities that are going on around the world right now, on the individual level, there's all these things that my heart pours out for. And at the same time, simultaneously, the universe itself is neutral and we just come and go. And that's just how it is. And so right now, as there's more and more light, more and more of us are awakening, more and more of us are being pulled up into our awareness and accessing more and more expansive levels of light and connection. There has to be and will be and is inherently going to be more and more darkness and thick, goopy energy trying to pull us down. And it's happening and we see it. And there's this separation then of this polarization that we're experiencing, again, speaking from the US. And so whatever you believe, if you believe that this spiritual path is calling you, and if you know in your heart energetically that this is what your path is, then just my encouragement is, it doesn't matter what you think. Drop into your heart and let your heart open, and then everything just is. And then the world will go on and do what it does.
So let's go further into that. How does one drop into their heart?
Yeah. It's such a beautiful, fundamentally, now after studying many of the world's traditions, spiritual traditions across, many domains, this is one of the main challenges and one of the main results for many of the techniques that are offered across traditions. Especially in the West, especially in the US, in our world as I was raised in, and as many of us are raised in now, is changing slowly for the kids. But we were raised in a world where, our minds were taught, we were taught that our minds were 100% important, and that our heart, we were never taught that the heart had wisdom, right? In Taoism, there's this term translated heart wisdom, which is the core of our experience, is our heart wisdom. It's not the mind, So meditation is a beautiful technique where, naturally we meditate and things settle and drop away and we can find our hearts. I have so many people that say, Aaron, that's great, but I cannot meditate. It's a perception. I can't do it. So then I teach them, okay, walking meditation. Okay, but can you walk? Can you walk and be silent? Can you put away your phone?
Can you drive with no sound on?
And I encourage this all the time. I say, okay, number one, actually, if you can't meditate, do you have 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes a day? Night, do you have 2 minutes, lunchtime, where you could just sit quietly and be? Set your alarm, put away your phone, put away everything, and just sit for 2 minutes. And can you do that for a week or maybe a month? And if people spend 2 minutes for a month, what happens is pretty soon they're doing 20 minutes because they can do it and they have all the time in the world. Stoplights, red lights. Can you just sit there? You have a minute or two. Can you just sit there quietly and be? Okay, now you can go again, right? As you're walking to get your coffee and your coffee break. Whatever it is, in the shower, right? Can that be your time of deep contemplation and prayer? Walking in nature, right? Connecting with nature is a beautiful way to drop into our hearts. Breathing, the breath work right now is so powerful. So I teach a lot of breath work to people to get them out of their minds. There's many techniques, but really it's also just about being in the body. And what happens is people say, yeah, I hear the whisper of the heart. But then the mind comes in and says, oh, I don't trust that. And so it's also just being encouraged to trust it. For the first time ever for so many people, right? Our parents, society does not teach us to ignore the mind. I love to say, the mind is like any other organ in our body. We don't give our lymphatic system control of our life purpose. We don't give our spleen control over what's important for us. Why would we give our brain that?
Exactly.
It's not, our spleen and our lymph system, they have their roles to play, and our brain's role to play is simply to keep us safe and to solve problems so we don't get eaten by tigers and run off a cliff and whatever, get hit by a car. It will always find the problems, and we all know this. It will always find the difficulties, and it will never stop because that's its job. Just like our heart pumps the blood, it doesn't stop. But that's not good. It's not appropriate. It's not useful for aligning with our purpose. So just encouraging people to, the brain is not in charge of who I am. It's there to, have discriminatory power to keep me safe. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. I can appreciate the mind then and allow it to do its thing. And then do we feel the whisper of like, it's so soft for people at times, right? It could be a soft whisper of intuition, of connection. And I pointed out for them that when we're having a conversation, that right there, that's your heart. And that's actually the beginning of your connection to your higher connection to all things. Your psychic abilities, your intuitive abilities all come through our heart wisdom space.
I had an experience a couple of weeks ago that I've been on my spiritual journey, awakening since 2018, but really started in 2020. And I know my guides now, and I talk to them regularly. And I was looking for something for the longest time, and it was this. It's called a loopy, and it goes on my phone case. And I had an extra one, and I was like, at my guide, I call her Shell. I'm like, Shell, where is the extra one? I cannot find it anywhere in my house. Where is it? And in my heart, and in that intuitive space, I heard backpack.
Beautiful.
And I'm like, what? So I had a backpack that I used to use all the time, and instantly I was like, oh yeah, I didn't empty it. So I went to that backpack, and there it was. And I was just like, I love you. I love you and me. You know what I mean? Like, we worked together on that. It wasn't, and I trusted, right? I was like, that is so amazing. And ever since, like, I'm always asking them stuff. I leave the music off in the car, and I just have full on conversations with them in the morning before I go to work. And I'm like, Kate, what do I need to know today? And I just I have conversations, and I hear them talking to me.
That's so beautiful. And I encourage everyone, all of us, every single one of us has this cluster of angels, spirits, beings of various kinds here around us these souls are choosing to be here in support of us. Always, every single one of us, all the time, every day, all day long, without pause. Even when things are bad, even when things are great, and every time in between. And when we settle enough to listen and reach out from our hearts with deep desire, they can reach down. They're always with us, but they can't connect with us unless we choose. We have to, that's one of the rules of Earth, is that they can't break that barrier, but we can. So as soon as we do, and the way we do it is by opening our hearts and reaching out with a longing and a depth of like, please connect with me, and energetically making a little hook. I love to say there's this old game called the Barrel of Monkeys where there's these little monkeys with a hooked hand.
Yep.
And they gave me this image to share. And so I share it with everyone. It's like, yeah, from your heart space energetically as a metaphor, like reach up with longing with a hooked hand. And then they're right there reaching down to connect with you. But you have to be there to connect with from your heart. Like, please, at first it's like, please, please, I need you to help me find my loopy. I need you to guide me on my path. I need you to tell me what's next, whatever whatever it is. And the more specific we are at first, and the more direction we can give them, they're right there and they want to help us, and they want to be able to show us that they're there for us because that's their purpose right now. And there's no time for them. They're in this space of timelessness. And
That's
so
funny that you say that, because this morning, as I was driving, I'm like, morning. And then I was like, oh yeah, never mind. It's not morning there.
And so sometimes, miracles are things that happen can be instantaneous when we don't expect them or don't have a rationale for them. A miracle can be anything, but they can happen instantly because there's no time, but also they could happen slowly by our standards because there's no time.
Exactly.
Sometimes it does take a while for their interference, if you will, to manifest with the shifts that have to occur to allow the thing to happen. And at other times it can be just like that and things appear for us.
Do you have to, do you think that we need to set intention on the things that we talk to them about?
Beautiful question. And I'm going to give a two-part answer. And it's that at first it's really useful. Because here's the thing. They're responding certainly to our voice and our mind and our thoughts and our prayers in all forms. But more than that, they're responding to our energetic alignment and our what are we entirely transmitting from our whole being. And so when we're first on the path, for many of us, we're not fully integrated. All of us, perhaps. And so by setting a clear intention, what that does for them from this perspective is it creates a deeper alignment when we sort of take the time to write it down or just say it to ourselves 3 times or deepen with a deep prayer in our hearts. Or there are many ways to do this. When we set a deep intention and sort of lock it in, it takes the alignment deeper and it radiates out to them more clearly. So initially it's really useful. Now, that also limits them because what we think we want, they know that what's possible for us is so much greater. So as we deepen into our experience on the journey, as we become more aligned, they're responding to the wholeness, the totality of our energy. So as we're more aligned with truly the direction of our soul's depth, they can then take that in a direction that's far beyond what we might ask for.
Okay, that is like blowing my mind right now.
Right. But do you feel the truth of that?
So much truth in that.
Right. So,
wow.
So as you go deeper,
so where do you know
it's turning over the trust as we, so at first people often at first, myself included, we don't trust enough to really know that how deeply we're held.
Yeah.
We're held so deeply, so powerfully, so completely. And so we do need really deep, at first too, and sometimes still now, it's not, I've been on this journey for a minute, and still now there are weeks or, when I get off my game and I need, hey, angels, hey, guides, I really need a really clear, I pray in the shower for my angels in the morning. All day long, I'm praying to my angels all day long. But in the morning, some days I'm like, wow, I just really need this week. I really need some really clear in my face signs that you're with me, that you're hearing me, that you have me. And here's some things I need from you right now. Please, please, please. Like I need this. Okay. So I do that still. But in general, I try my general way now is to hold the radiance of my heart of knowing my path and my soul's journey. And that's my intention. Is I'm aligned with this expansive, joyful path, and what it looks like is less important from that because I know it's so beautiful, whatever might occur. And then I just thank them and put my trust and say, I know you have me. I look forward to the journey. Let's go.
I
Now,
love that.
we still have to take action every day.
Mm-hmm.
They can't, if we just sit on the couch and curl up, which sometimes we need to do for ourselves. I do. I'm an introvert, right? We have to then still, they can move through us, move the universe, change things, but we, with our free will, have to choose to take advantage, to answer the phone call, to respond to the email, to say yes to the person that's waving us from across the street.
To
all
do
the
a
ways.
podcast interview, to host
Bingo.
to
All the
actually
things,
do the
right? The
things.
opportunities come and we have to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean, the fact that we're held so deeply and that we don't have to have the intention doesn't mean we don't follow through.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll create, these conversations wherein we can come alive and have this beautiful conversation and connection, which hopefully then whoever's listening, for some of people, will spark, right? There are one or two people or 5 or 10 or 100, or a million that will listen to this and be sparked, and it will change something within them. And if it's you that's listening, then I applaud you, and to all of you. For some of you, it will spark this conversation right this moment, something in you that will change your life forever.
Because I know I heard one 4, 5, 6 years ago that sparked mine.
Because I had bingo. And it's not, it's not me or you, it's us getting out of the way and speaking truth to our path. And it's the words and energy between us that is what's changing the world.
It could have been something in a book. It could have been something
and
from a tree.
For all of us.
Yeah.
For me too, I often, I have it in my house now where I'm looking around, and on every surface, wherever I sit, I make sure that I have a collection of sacred books around, that wherever I sit, I can just not always pick up my phone. I can also pick up a sacred book and just open it to a random page and read some soul nourishing food for myself. For example,
that's awesome.
To be sort of immersed in that.
Okay, so you receive messages from guides and angels and ancestors. And what was it like when you first started hearing from them? And did you trust it right away, or did it take a little bit to get out of your way?
It was a journey. It was a long journey for me. It was a slow journey. And first it was my grandfather. So I was still living in the jungle. I was still doing biology, and my grandfather passed away. I didn't know this. I was out where I didn't know I was out in the jungle in Africa with zero connection to
the world,
to any notice for months. For months on end. And so there was this week when I was just thinking of my grandpa all the time in a really deep way. And I was like, oh, I really, in a way, I was close to him, but not like this. I was like, oh, I really need to go see him when I get back. I miss him. I'm thinking of him for like a solid week. I mentioned it to my friends. I wrote about it in my journal. It was about 6 months later that I learned that he had passed.
6 months. Wow. Yeah, and that whole time, was he present, or as an angel? He was,
but really strongly during this 1 week or so.
Okay.
Period. But it was so strong that I was like, wait a minute. It was my dad told me, and I was like, Dad, it was my dad's father. When did Grandpa die exactly? When was the funeral? When? And he told me, and I looked back, I had written it down in my notebook, and I knew exactly, and it was exactly then that I had this deep. And so it was so powerfully obvious that it wasn't me thinking of him, that it was him. And even at the time, it was early on in my journey, it was still this rational scientist. I couldn't ignore it. It was like, oh, wow, he came to me. That was unequivocal. And then my great grandmother started to come to me and want to speak to me and sort of come through. And she was very insistent. And then other people started to came through, and it sort of snowballed from there. It took about, it was like a decade later when voices started to come through for other people. And they would, guides or ancestors would sort of knock me on the shoulder and give me messages. Sort of, I'm claircognizant mostly, so they would just like push me these messages. They would sort of just, all of a sudden my brain was filled with a clear message for somebody. And sometimes I knew them, and I would say like, hey, this is kind of weird. At the time I was still like insecure about it.
Like, was this when you were the executive, or was this when did this happen?
Yeah, I was an executive. Yeah, I was flying around, and so, it wasn't, I wouldn't do it for people at work, but like messages would come for people that were my friends, and I'd be like, hey, I don't know you that well, but this came through. Are you open to hearing something? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and then when that happened, when I was open to that, then more messages would come through
Yeah.
because they really want to connect. And
Mm-hmm.
now more and more people are open to connection. But now I know that when there's an open conduit for a voice to come through,
Mm-hmm.
they're the spirits, the ancestors are going to use that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it would be someone I didn't know so well, and it became a little, hey, I don't really know you, but let me give you this message. you know,
And what was
and
their
then
reaction usually?
sometimes, usually they were open to hear it, and sometimes they'd be like, "Okay, thanks," and walk away, kind of, and
Yeah.
sometimes they'd be like, "Wow, thank you, that was really powerful."
Yeah.
Overall, I got very positive feedback,
Mm-hmm.
enough that even though I was insecure and sort of nervous about it, continued on, and it just opened up the floodgates from there, where then ultimately now, even when I learned to read the Akashic Records, like now when I go up to the records, I sort of open up and go through various realms of energy.
Mm-hmm.
The way it works for me, because these voices are so strong for me, is that I go through a realm first of ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
and then I open up more, and there's sort of angels and spirit guides broadly across dimensions will come and speak through me, and then I go up into the Akashic Records.
Mm-hmm.
But like when I open it for somebody, when I'm working with somebody, now almost always I'll receive, not always, sometimes the ancestors don't have a lot to say.
Mm-hmm.
The guides always have things to say. And so my
Yeah.
readings, I make sure people know that, like, that, and I can't, and then I'll go to the records, but like this can be maybe more useful because the guides and ancestors are here in our service.
Yeah.
What comes through me is here entirely in our service.
So for Akashic Records, I've had 2 Akashic Records readings
Okay,
done, and for those listening that have zero idea what we're talking about right now,
please.
what is that?
Yeah. So people speak about it as like the library of all things or the repository of knowledge across all time.
Mm-hmm.
I love to think of everything, and I experience the way I experience and interact with it is a band of frequency and vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And, even science says that everything is frequency and vibration. We're entirely, everything we can see and touch and feel is all just frequency and vibration. And so, and then also there's a fact that all time is now, right? Time as we experience it is a figment of our imagination, and our bodies create this three-dimensional time that we experience. It doesn't actually exist inherently. So there's only one time, and everything is here. And so the vibrations and frequencies that exist in us are never, there's nowhere to go. They're here all the time. And so there's a frequency band of energy in the astral realms wherein the information across from everyone across all time exists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's just, so it could be, it's a library, it's a repository. It's also just this band of energy wherein everything is there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And are
we
you
say
shown
past lives.
symbols or are you shown
I'm
words or
shown, for me, I see pictures and images and words. I'm given, so, we say past lives.
Mm-hmm.
So like all of everyone's past lives are there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes thousands, millions of them, sometimes just a few. Again, time doesn't really exist. So that's kind of a misnomer. It's sort of other lives that are all concurrently being experienced.
Mm-hmm.
They're all there. And so I'll get like snapshots of images of these lives, and then so what happens is for me, right? So all the information for everyone across all time is there. So then what happens is I attune, for example, to you, if I'm working with you. So what's going on with you right now? We'll have a few minutes to chat about what's your life is going on, what could be useful for you, what you want to unlock right now for your highest good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll tune into those frequencies, and I'll ask energetically, what information can you show me
Mm-hmm.
from all of the information across time, which will be useful to unlock what's happening for you right now?
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because otherwise, so you can have readings and it can go on and on. I mean, I can show you all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, saying, oh, you were Cleopatra and you lived in this, you were the queen. Maybe that's useful for your life right now, or maybe it's not.
Right.
Often
Yeah.
it's not. Usually it's, oh, there's so many people right now. Have you heard the term the witch wound?
Mm-hmm.
We heard
Mm-hmm.
this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who haven't heard that, and it's true for men too, it's just useful. Witch wound is so nicely
Mm-hmm.
alliterative. For all of us, the last several thousand years, we've been cut off societally from our direct connection to spirit, to plant medicines, to our wisdom, to our personal, tribal wisdom and spirituality and
Yep.
connection to the earth. All of us have been. And so our grandparents, back generations, grandparents loosely, multi-generational across time from our lineage, as well as our past lives in these past several thousand years, have experienced deep traumas with expressing spirituality in a direct, tangible way. Hugging trees and talking to spirits in this way was deeply unsafe, could get you beaten, burned, killed, etc., for generations and generations and many past lives. So many of those energies then are still influencing us, for example. So it's useful for people that are experiencing that, people who say, oh yeah, I feel this impulse, but I don't feel safe. I
Right.
don't know why. I
Yeah.
feel like I shouldn't. Well, maybe it was your grandmother who had an experience where she was, or great grandmother, was told she couldn't and had, was sort of beaten for that. Or maybe it was a past life where you experienced some trauma around that experience. And for many people, that is true. And then we can, because all time is now, we can work with those energies and actually shift the narrative. Even
I
it's,
haven't
again,
never
there's
thought of
no
that.
past.
That's
So
right.
I do a lot of ancestral healing and also past life clearing of the energies that are going to bind you now in this day in life, in this body, from that energy. So we can massage the energy and the ripples of currents of time to untangle the knots that keep you bound by those events, for example.
Wow.
And that really allows a deeper freedom and alignment to occur.
Absolutely. Holy
So
smoke.
that's one. There's many ways we can use this repository. That's one deep example. And one thing I love to do with people, it's one of the sessions I offer, is really to do that.
My mind is like, I literally could go on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And I had like a million more questions. So I'm going to have you on again.
I would love to.
Because this is wild. Um, I ask every guest before I close out an interview what they are grateful for today. Before you go, I'm going to say what I'm grateful for. I am grateful for this conversation and these reminders of everything that I have been experiencing over the last 5, 6 years and how beautiful it is. Sometimes I get back into my 3D world and I forget. And it's these kind of conversations that remind me how incredibly beautiful this part of my life has become. What are you grateful for today?
Yeah, today, so grateful to be here and have this conversation with you for sure. And, grateful that in this world around me now, there are so many people and souls that are open to these conversations, that we can be open and vulnerable and clearly, and people will receive this and open their own hearts and then share their own journeys. And, today alone, I've had 3 or 4 other really deep soul-led conversations that were speaking about the hard times and also the joys that has brought to all of us.
Mhm.
And, that sharing, even, conversations where we can share our shame
Mhm.
and our sorrow and bring all of that to the light and just allow it to dissipate through love and connection.
Mhm.
And, this is what changes the world. When
Being
we bring our darkness
vulnerable.
to the light, when
Mhm.
we bring our darkness to the light and just trust in the goodness, we are changed, and we are, I have been dramatically, my life is dramatically more joyous, happy, open, expansive, alive. And I know that I am enlivened by all those around me who share the same.
Mhm.
We can all transform each other and the world. Really, this is the deep truth, that we are changing the world by changing ourselves. And it's not just a bumper sticker. This is the deepest truth.
It is. It is a deep, deep truth. So, where people can find you is right here, and your website. What can people find when they go to your website?
Yeah, so my website, you can find information about my Akashic readings, my mediumship sessions, my ancestral healing and beyond. Also, other offerings I have right now. I offer classes on connecting with your angels and spirit guides. I offer work in deep meditation and breath work, different courses that are rolling coming up. I do men's work specifically as well to connect with our magic and work with the men on that. Or right now coming up, I have a course on the I Ching and really deepening into the divination of all time and how that can expand our connection to the universe. So there's a diverse rolling set of offerings. And my Instagram as well is Natural Heart Alchemy. The website's the same. And I look forward to connecting with anyone who feels called to reach out.
Awesome. I am definitely having you on again. So
Well, thank you, Tiff. So great.
Stay tuned for that one, everyone. Part 2 with Aaron French. Thank you again so much for this beautiful conversation. I am beyond grateful for you. So thank you.
It's been a joy. Yeah, take care.
Thanks. Thanks for being here for this episode of Hard Beautiful Journey. I hope today's episode inspired you to embrace your own vulnerabilities and recognize the strength within you. Remember, every story of resilience adds to the beauty of our shared journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. Your support helps me spread hope and healing to even more listeners. Until next time, keep shining your light and embracing the beauty in your journey. Bye-bye.